Welcome. Political science students, we are welcome to the third semester political science. As you know, this course for political science major students, this course is divided into 5 units, and unit 1 is organs of government. The instructor for this unit is Mr. G. Ramesh, Assistant Professor, St. Joseph's College for Women, Autonomous, Visakhapatnam, Department of Political Science, Andhra Pradesh, India. Learning outcomes. The third chapter of this unit is Executive Types, Powers and Functions. By the end of this chapter, the learner should be able to describe the different types of executive structures, understand the primary roles and responsibilities of the executive branch, explain the concept of separation of powers and how the executive branch interact with the legislature and judicial branches, analyze the specific powers granted to the executive, and finally evaluate how the executive branch functions in different government systems. Content. This unit, that is organs of the government, is divided into 4 chapters, and the third chapter is executive types, powers and functions. The content of this chapter are executive branch introduction, composition of the executive branch, types of executive, powers and functions of the executive branch, and finally conclusion. Now let's go into the lesson and look at the executive types, powers and functions. Executive types, powers and functions. Executive is one of the organ of the government. Executive, the main function of the executive is to implement laws formed by the legislature. It consists of the highest executive. For example, in India, President of India and Vice President, Prime Minister and Council of Ministers and other bureaucracy. The President and central ministers are elected and they are the political executive. So executive is headed by the President, who is the chief executive of the country. So the executive is the branch of government responsible for the implementation of laws and policies adopted by the legislature. The main function of the executive is the branch of government responsible for the implementation of laws and policies adopted by the legislature involved in the framing of policy. So the executive is often involved in framing of policy. The official designations of the executive vary from country to country. For example, in India, the king or queen is the highest executive in England. For example, in India, the President of India. For example, in USA, the President of US is the highest executive. So some countries have presidents while others have chancellors, king, etc. The executive branch is one of the 3 branches of the government. It is responsible for carrying out and enforcing the laws made by the union legislature. So executive power implies certain authority to control administration and manage various activities within a nation. So all executive power and action to tackle various political activities are formally taken on the name of the president or chancellor, etc. Composition and structure of the executive branch. President, Vice President and Cabinet. The President is the head of the executive branch. They are responsible for appointing federal judges, signing bills into law and commanding the armed forces. The Vice President is the second highest ranking official in the executive branch. They serve as the chairman of Rajya Sabha and take over the presidency of the president or is removed from office. And cabinet. The cabinet is made of the heads of the 15 executive departments or more than 15 executive departments. They advise the president on a range of issues and help to carry out the president's policies. Executive types. The executive branch of the government is responsible for implementing and enforcing the laws. Executive is the branch of government responsible for the implementation of laws and policies adopted by the legislature. The executive is often involved in framing of policy. The official designations of the executive vary from country to country. Some countries have presidents, for example in India, President of India and US President, and UK King or Queen. So some countries have presidents while others have chancellors, king or queen, etc. There are various types of executive structures, each with its own unique characteristics and advantages. Types of executive. First one, single executive. Single executive, concentrated power and clear accountability, potential for abuse. A single executive such as a president or prime minister consolidates power and can make decisions efficiently. Clear accountability. Voters can easily hold a single executive accountable for their actions and policies. Potential for abuse. A single executive can also become too powerful and potentially abuse their authority. The other one of executive, plural executive. Shared power, checks and balances, potential for gridlock. In a plural executive system, power is shared among multiple officials such as a president and prime minister and council of ministers. Checks and balances. This structure provides more checks and balances, reducing the risk of a single individual gaining too much power. Potential for gridlock. However, it can also lead to political gridlock if the executive are unable to reach consensus. Nominal executive. Nominal executive plays ceremonial role, symbolic representation, potential for stability. In a nominal executive system, the head of the state has a largely ceremonial role with limited actual powers. Symbolic representation. The nominal executive serves as a symbol of the nation, but the real power lies with other government institutions. Potential for stability. The system can provide stability and continuity as the nominal executive is often hereditary. Real executive. The term real executive typically refers to the individual or body that holds the actual executive power as opposed to a ceremonial figurehead. In many countries, this is the head of the government, such as a prime minister, president, or chancellor. The real executive is responsible for implementing laws, overseeing the administration, and guiding the government policy and decision making process. In the real executive, he acts as a head of a government. The real executive is the individual or group that actually wields executive power and makes key decisions. And policy implementation. The real executive is responsible for implementing and enforcing the laws and policies of the government. The real executive acts as accountable. The real executive is accountable to the legislature and the people for their actions and decisions. Hereditary executive. A hereditary executive refers to a leadership position within a government or state that is passed down through family lines, typically from one generation to the next generation. This type of leadership is most commonly associated with monarchies, where the head of state, such as a king, queen, emperor, or sultan, inherits the position by birthright rather than through election or appointment. So, some types of hereditary executives are absolute monarchy, constitutional monarchy, etc. So, the dynastic succession. In a hereditary executive system, the head of state is determined by birth and passed down through a ruling family. This system can provide a sense of stability and tradition as the leadership remains within the same lineage. Lack of accountability. However, hereditary executives are not accountable to the people and may not represent their interests. Elected and nominated executive. In government, elected and nominated executive refers to different types of leadership roles within the executive branch. Here's a breakdown of these terms. Elected executive. In the elected executive, the head of the state is directly elected by the people. An elected executive is an individual who attains their position through a democratic election process. In this, provides direct democratic representation. This type of executive is often seen in presidential and parliamentary systems where the head of government or state is chosen by the electoral or a representative body. So it can be vulnerable to populist appeals and demagoguery. So examples of elected executives, presidential system, for example in United States, Brazil, and parliamentary systems, United Kingdom, Canada, India, etc. The elected executives had some responsibilities: policy making and administration, legislative interaction, representation, etc. Nominated executive is an individual appointed to an executive position through a selection process rather than by election. This can occur in various governmental systems, typically in parliamentary or hybrid systems, where the head of the state or other officials nominate individuals for key executive roles. The nomination is often subject to approval by a legislative body or other governing entity. In this, the head of the state is nominated by a governing body such as a legislature, can lead to more experienced and qualified candidates nominated as an executive, and may lack direct accountability to the people in this nominated executive. Political and permanent executive. In government, the terms political executive and permanent executive refers to different categories of officials within the executive branch, each with distinct roles, responsibilities, and mode of appointment. So, the political executive. The political executive is composed of elected officials who serve for a limited term and are responsible for setting policy. The political executive comprises individuals who are elected or appointed to lead and make high-level policy decisions. Their tenure is usually tied to the electoral cycle or the term of the appointing authority. The permanent executive. The permanent executive is non-elected civil service that provides continuity and expertise in government operations. The permanent executive refers to career civil servants and bureaucrats who provide continuity within the government. They are usually appointed through a merit-based system and hold their positions regardless of changes in the political leadership. Complementary roles. The political and permanent executives work together to implement policies and ensure smooth functioning of the government. In political systems, the term parliamentary executive and non-parliamentary executive refers to different frameworks for organizing the executive branch and its relationship with the legislature. Parliamentary executive. In a parliamentary system, the executive is responsible to the legislature and can be removed by a vote of no confidence. A parliamentary executive is a system where the executive branch derives its legitimacy and authority from the legislature, it means parliament in India, and is accountable to it. This system is common in many democracies around the world. Non-parliamentary executive. In a non-parliamentary system, the executive is independent of the legislature and has a clear separation of powers. A non-parliamentary executive is a system where the executive branch operates independently of the legislature. So, this system is typically found in presidential and semi-presidential systems. Powers of the executive branch. Executive orders. The President can issue executive orders which are directives that have the force of law and are used to direct the federal bureaucracy. Executive orders are directives issued by the head of the executive branch of government, such as a president or prime minister, to manage operations within the federal government. They have the force of law and are used to direct government agencies and officials in their execution of congressionally established laws or policies. Appointments. The President appoints federal judges, ambassadors, and other high-ranking officials. The selection and nomination of individuals to hold key positions within the executive branch of government. These positions are typically filled by the head of the executive branch, example, President, Prime Minister, etc., and can include roles in the cabinet, judiciary, regulatory agencies, and other significant administrative posts they appointed. Veto power. The President has the power to veto bills passed by the Parliament. The President can also issue executive orders which have the force of law. The executive had veto power is the authority vested in an individual or body to unilaterally stop an official action, especially the enactment of legislation. This power is most commonly associated with the executive branch of government, such as a president or governor of the state, who can veto bills passed by the legislative branch. The head of the executive acts as a commander-in-chief. The President is a commander-in-chief of the armed forces. They have the power to deploy troops and wage war. Roles and responsibilities of the executive. Head of the executive acts as a chief executive, chief in commander, chief diplomat, chief legislator. The President is responsible for carrying out the laws passed by the Parliament. They are also responsible for appointing federal judges, ambassadors, and other high-ranking officials. The President is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. They have the power to deploy troops and wage war. Chief diplomat. The President is responsible for conducting foreign policy and negotiating treaties with other countries. They are also responsible for appointing ambassadors and other diplomats. The executive is act as in chief legislator. The President has the power to propose legislation to Parliament. They can also use their influence to persuade Parliament to pass laws that they support. Checks and balances on executive power. Judicial review, parliamentary oversight, public opinion. The judicial branch has the power to review laws passed by the Parliament and executive orders issued by the President. If the court finds that a law or executive order is unconstitutional, it can be struck down. Parliament has the power to oversee the actions of the executive branch. Legislature can investigate the actions of the executive branch and can impeach the President. Public opinion can also act as a check on executive power. If the public is unhappy with the president's actions, they can vote them out of office. Conclusion and key takeaways. The executive branch plays a vital role in the government. It is responsible for enforcing the laws made by the parliament and for carrying out the policies of the president. The executive branch is also subject to checks and balances from the other branches of government. Executive is the branch of government responsible for implementation of laws and policies adopted by the legislature. The executive is often involved in framing of policy. The official designations of the executive vary from country to country. Some countries have presidents while others have chancellors or king or queen. The main function of the executive is the branch of government responsible for the implementation of laws and policies adopted by the legislature involved in the framing of policy. In India, Union Executive consists of all the government people at the central level. Union Executive consists of a President, Vice President, Council of Ministers, and Prime Minister holds all powers and guides presidents in taking important decisions on national resource. In the absence of a President, Vice President takes all the decisions on his behalf of. What have we learnt? Identify and describe the different types of executive structures. Understand the primary roles and responsibilities of the executive branch. Explain the concept of separation of powers and how the executive branch interact with the legislature and judicial branches. Analyze the specific powers granted to the executive. And finally, evaluate how the executive branch functions in different government systems. Thank you. All the images have been copied from open sources on Google.